The Edgerunners collab is almost here, and with it we are going to be getting Lucy as our limited character. But given the limited nature of collab characters, should you pull for Lucy? That's what I'm going to be talking about in today's video by discussing her biggest pros and cons. First of all, one of the good things Lucy does is that she is going to be pretty cheap. Lucy, outside of getting Lucy herself, is one of the most inexpensive characters within the game. She only really wants Rebecca, and Rebecca is given out for free, and then she also wants Mornia, but there's a pretty good chance you already own Mornia anyway, given how strong of a character she is. And if you don't have her, you're most likely going to be getting her eventually. Lucy's best team is obviously with Rebecca, and she was made to be used with Rebecca, so Rebecca being free is something very good for Lucy as a character. Especially since both Lucy and Rebecca are also pistol characters, giving them access to the best standard banner weapons in the game. Static Mist for Rebecca in order to buff your Lucy further, and then Phasic Homogenizer to put on Lucy. As for Mornia, getting an R5 Discord on her is actually going to be better than her signature weapon in this team, because her signature weapon simply makes her rotation longer. You don't need to use her Forte Heavy Attack if you're running an R5 Discord, and Mornia's Forte Heavy Attack is useless within a Lucy-Rebecca team anyway. This is because Mornia's Interfered Marker only works with Toon Strain and Toon Rupture, so the hack mechanic that Lucy and Rebecca have access to is most likely not going to be included in these requirements, and thus, you're not going to be able to get the 40% damage bonus buff from Mornia's Interfered Marker, and thus, getting an R5 Discord on your Mornia is going to be more efficient than getting Mornia's signature weapon. So overall, outside of getting Lucy herself, the only limited thing you're gonna need to pull for is getting a singular Mornia. Outside of that, you're going to be completely fine with a very cheap Lucy team. Something else that's nice about Lucy is that she's also going to be good in the early rounds of Matrix. Now the reason that I specify the early rounds is because Lucy has an inherent skill that gives her damage amplification as well as a damage multiplier increase to her hack damage whenever a boss is killed via direct damage. Now this is going to be a pretty niche interaction, only usable in two types of content, those being End State Matrix, as well as the very last floor of the Tower of Adversity. However, because her damage is going to increase over time the more bosses you kill, it means that Lucy is going to be one of the most efficient characters to use in the early rounds of Matrix. The early rounds have this issue where because bosses have less HP, it's going to be a lot less effort to kill them. And thus, it means that there's a much higher likelihood that you're eventually gonna run into a boss that resists your main DPS. For example, if you want to use Imeth in your first round of Matrix, there's a much higher chance that she's going to end up running into Reactor Husk compared to the second or third round. Now obviously Lucy is not immune to this either, but at least the inherent skill gives you some sort of benefit for using her in the earlier rounds. Meanwhile, other DPSs do not have anything of the sort. Unfortunately, when it comes to good things to say about Lucy, this is kind of where it ends, because Lucy is going to be one of the more disappointing characters releasing in version 3.x. The main thing you're gonna notice is that Lucy's damage ceiling is significantly lower than the rest of the Lahai Roy cast. Currently, Imeth has the highest raw DPS in the game, followed by Sigrika, Hiyuki, and Luke, who are all very close to each other. Then a good bit lower than that, we get Cardathea and main DPS Yuno, and then we start looking at characters like Augusta, Frolova, and Galbrenna. Lucy ends up falling below every single one of these characters, making her closer to a character like Carlotta than she is to even scratching the 3.x character roster. And considering that she is releasing in version 3.4, that is incredibly sad. Lucy's damage output simply is not up there to compete with the current good units. So if you're pulling for Lucy, please be aware that the only reason you should be pulling for this character is because you really like Edgerunners and you want to get the Edgerunners character. Now I'm not saying her damage output is bad, that would just strictly be lying. But it would be an even bigger lie to say that she is going to be a strong meta character, because she just straight up isn't. And if that wasn't bad enough, that's just strictly talking about bossing content. When we're talking about outside of bossing content like Whimpering Wastes, I believe that Lucy might end up hitting a historic low. Yes, I believe she might end up even being worse within the game mode than Luke Herson, which is saying something. Whimpering Wastes demands 3 things of you: high damage output, consistent damage output, and good AoE. Now, the strong damage output we can already kind of cross off. She does not have very high damage output by today's standards, but I would honestly argue that for Whimpering Waste that's fine. Flova also is not exactly known for her insane damage output, yet she's still one of the strongest Whimpering Waste characters. So you know what? Maybe Lucy has a chance. So let's look at the other points. Her AoE is looking at the very least decent, to the point where she's able to hit every single enemy in a wave. So hey, at least she's got that part down. However, where she starts struggling is the consistent damage output focus. And considering the fact that she was already struggling on damage output itself, I don't think she's able to really afford putting it all in one point, because most of Lucy's damage is centered around her forte heavy attack as well as her liberation. And it just so happens that she's going to use each one of these after the other. So she's basically putting a vast majority of her damage within the same 1 or 2 seconds. So how many waves are you expecting this character to clear within her rotation exactly? Because I don't think it's gonna be a lot. At least Luke, in his horrible state in Whimpering Waste, had more than one way to completely wipe out a wave. And unlike Lucy, they were not positioned right after the other. Of course, his third forte skill into his forte plunge into his liberation is all one after another. However, his other 2 forte skills also had more than enough damage to deal with waves efficiently. Lucy simply does not have that, so I believe Lucy is going to be awful within Whimpering Wastes. And then for my final point, I talked about it a little bit before, but I'm gonna discuss it again now, because I'm really confused by this decision. Lucy is going to be unable to use Mornia's interfered marker, and I already explained why before. Lucy does not use Toon Rupture or Toon Strain, instead using her own system called Hack, which Mornia does not interact with. So while this makes Discord especially strong on Mornia and makes her unable to really need her signature weapon, it does vastly lower Lucy's damage ceiling, which, as we discussed, is already a bit of a problem for this character. It also makes it significantly harder for someone to invest into their Lucy team, because it means you have to instantly jump the shark in order to get her S1 before you decide to get Mornia's signature weapon. So overall, your first investment that you can make aside from Lucy herself is automatically going to be a bit more expensive, because Mornia's S1 is going to be better than getting Rebecca's signature weapon. And overall, because Lucy's damage ceiling already isn't that high in the first place, I feel like giving her access to 40% damage bonus with questionable uptime really would not have been that much of a crime. But those are just my thoughts on Lucy. Let me know what you think of her down in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord server, which is linked in the description down below. But that'll be all from me. Peace!